Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm going to Miami in like 5 days. How are you? Much
Doing
the
pretty-
same, I'd suspect.
Yes. In fact, I might see you there. How's that?
That'd be fun.
It would be fun. It could be fun. It might be fun. I've never been to Miami. I've been to other parts of Florida. I assume northern Florida is very much like Miami.
Except in all of the ways, yes. Other than all of the ways, yes. But yeah, I think it's I think you will enjoy Miami. I think you will think it is fantastic. I thought I had Miami saved in my phone. I was just going to check the weather. Sure, it's going to be nice. It should be delightful.
Low 70s first couple of days, 78 as a high on Monday. So
we should probably stop talking about this before we start getting bad reviews about what jerks we are.
Yeah, let's actually just start the show. Monday was the day we were recording right now. That was also the first day of national championship game media availabilities. We talked to Nick Saban, head coach of Alabama, Devontae Smith, All-American wide receiver, and the prohibitive Heisman favorite. He's like 1-9 odds right now. And then quarterback Patrick Surtain Jr., and also Ohio State head coach Ryan Day, linebacker Tuff Borland, and running back Trey Sermon. Tom, we were supposed to talk to Justin Fields. And I know why he got bumped. It's because everybody was going to ask him how he's feeling, what's hurting, what did doctors say to you? Why didn't the doctors get you an x-ray? Why did you choose why didn't the doctors, poke you here or poke you there? And of course, Ryan Day does not like to talk about injuries. So you know what? Let's just not put Justin Fields out there. Let Ryan Day control the narrative, and the narrative is that Justin Fields is fine, will be fine, is going to play, is expected to play. The part that I'm not sure if I believe is when Day said, yeah, in fact, Justin told me today that he woke up feeling better than he thought he would the morning after the game.
I guess that depends on how bad Justin felt like he was going to feel the day after the game, because I looked at that hit and went, he's going to feel extremely bad the day after the game. You could think, the old the pain scale they have at the doctor where it's the smiley face on the 1 and then the frowny face on the 10. You could think you're going to wake up an 8, wake up a 7 instead and be like, oh, I'm waking up feeling better than I thought I would. Still not great, but better than I thought I would.
Yeah, and so I'm sure he'll be taking it easy quite a bit. Ryan Day said nothing changes with regard to practice, but I'm guessing he won't be going full go anytime soon. And who knows how full go he's been going anyway, with the thumb last week and now his hip and back and ribs. People were trying to, but Ryan, was it broken ribs, or if you could just, what did the doctors say? And of course, Ryan Day does not get into that. That's what he leaves the availability report for, even though the availability report does not go into the injuries, just whether a player is available or not, or is a game time decision. And so it is fun to watch and listen to the national media when they show up on these things, unfamiliar with Ryan Day, and try to be like, I'll get an answer. I'll get to the bottom of this Justin Fields thing. And they'll want to know which vertebrae and which particular rib. And of course, Ryan Day is like, well, I don't even know what ribs are. And so there's Justin who, and I'm not, throwing shade at Ryan Day or anything. It's just funny to watch people unfamiliar with his rules and come up against them and think they're just going to be told whatever they want. And I don't know that many coaches are open enough to do that anyway.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone is sufficiently cowed by the website you write for to go, oh, well, normally I don't, but you write for this website. So therefore, I will tell you out of respect for the professionalism which you display and your ability to use a mute button correctly and all of these other things that are extremely important. This is the time of year when coaches are just everyone, college coaches are always very secretive, very controlling. That just is like what comes with the territory. That's only going to be more so when you're playing for something with the stakes that they are playing for next Monday night. So don't expect Ryan Day to share any information. It's nothing personal. That's just how it works. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm imagining like, hey Ryan, my name's Mike. I'm from the Hattiesburg Herald, and wanted to know how Justin Fields' ribs are. And Ryan Day would be like, well, normally I don't go into that, but I do love me some Hattiesburg.
Mm-hmm. I'm a big Brett Favre fan. So
yeah, and so let me just tell you, and the bruising is right here. It's in the shape of Alaska. It goes up towards the spleen and then down towards the liver, and just really get in there. And I'm not sure the directions of the actual organs, but you get the idea. I'm also not all that familiar with the shape of Alaska, so it kind of fits.
The Aleutian Islands there would be a real like that might be a bad thing. Here's the other thing. He doesn't, not that he ever does this anyway, but he's not going to want to go into a ton of detail on it because, this is like the NHL. When the NHL puts out injury reports, it's just like upper body injury, lower body injury. Because if you say, yeah, this dude broke his right wrist a week ago, someone's going to come in there and slash at that right wrist. If you tell them that you've got a bad ankle or your calf got hurt, like someone's going to smack you in the calf with their stick. I don't think Alabama would be above going and putting a hit on Justin Fields and trying to, try and impact his ability to play in the game or his ability to play at a certain level during the game. They are playing for something fairly consequential too. And so, not that there's a big mystery as to where exactly the injury was, because everyone saw where the helmet hit, but as far as, the severity of it or exactly what the issue is, I'm sure that there's no real benefit to Ryan Day to share that information. So there's no real reason for him to share it.
Yeah. And I'm not sure what Alabama's rules are. We learned Clemson's were pretty much the same as Ohio State's with the availability report, although then Dabo will also go into injuries for some reason. I was asked today, Tom, about Justin Fields' performance and where it ranks like all time in Ohio State lore. Is it the greatest individual performance? And it's crazy to think that 2 weeks ago was arguably the greatest individual performance by an Ohio State Buckeye with Trey Sermon. And then you've got Justin Fields throwing for 385 yards, more than half of that, with bruises all over his body. When I wrote the Ryan Day Justin Fields is going to play story, I went to your hockey analogy and I called it just a mid-body injury because, that's about where it was. But for you, where do you think this ranks? Because it's hard to think of any quarterback performances better than it. I compared it to, Troy Smith, Michigan type of game, like 2004 when he was running and throwing, kind of bringing the Buckeyes through an inexplicable blowout and just dominating. So where do you put it? Does it remind you of any others? I mean, Kenny Guyton's 6 touchdowns or 7 touchdowns against Florida A&M or Cal or whatever.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, well, he tied a school record and he did it injured. And he did it on a playoff stage as an underdog against a team that had, all of the last 12 months going on. I mean, the context there, all of that context adds to it. And, you look at a lot of the other 6-ton touchdown performances, and it was, I think it was Kenny Guyton against Cal, maybe. Was that his 6-touchdown performance? I mean, they have had a few 6-touchdown passing games in semi-recent memory, but nothing on that stage. Like it's a lot easier to throw for 6 touchdowns against a much worse team than Clemson. So yeah, I think that has to be pretty close to the top of the list because you start going through like what are the greatest individual performances in Ohio State history. And you end up with a whole bunch of running backs. You end up with like Terry Glenn against Pittsburgh in 1995. You end up with, I don't know, David Boston against Michigan in 1998, maybe. But yeah, there's just, but there's a lot of Archie Griffin and Keith Byers and Eddie George and Ezekiel Elliott on that list. And, do you want to say Cardale Jones against Wisconsin in 2014? I mean, the numbers aren't there. I mean, because a lot of that was Ezekiel Elliott as well. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you watch it, and I always feel like I'm really hesitant to say yes, this was the greatest because there's that real recency bias where as you watch it, it's like, wow, this is the greatest thing, and it is not. not every week is it like this is the greatest thing, and you're running into that with Alabama this year. Like every time Alabama's undefeated, it's like this is the greatest team in college football history. It's like no, it's not. They're very good. They're not the greatest team in college football history. This is not the greatest Alabama team Nick Saban has had in the last 5 years. They're very good. No one is taking anything away from Alabama. Just because you can't remember anything before last Tuesday doesn't mean that no one else can. Like, I'm sorry you have the memory of a goldfish. Nothing, not everything that's happening right now is the greatest ever. That being said, I'm really struggling to come up with something that was, the combination of the stage, the stakes, the injury, all of that, and then the performance on top of it. I don't know that I'm coming up with anything right now.
And usually big passing days, like record passing days, are involved in losing and trying to come back. And this was never a comeback I guess early on it was a comeback. When it was 7-0 and then 14-7, it's a comeback. But from then on, it's a runaway, and he was at the forefront. And it's 331 yards is tough to ignore, and so is 385. It would be I think those two things have an argument for the best two individual days, significant argument for the best two individual days in Ohio State history offensively. And then defensively, I know people always want to talk about the Chris Spielman 29 tackles. 29 tackles just means you're giving up first downs after first downs after first downs. And yeah, that's great that you're tackling, but maybe tackle in the backfield.
Yeah.
And not to rip on Chris Spielman, but I'm sure there are better 13 tackle, 3.5 tackles for loss, three sack performances that are better than 29 tackles. I should go back and chart where all of those tackles were, and then I could really rip the guy.
Well, and I mean, to the point that you made earlier about big passing performances typically coming in losses, if that's 29 tackles and they held Michigan to 2.3 yards per rush and won the game, like that's a very different thing than, well, Jamie Morris kind of ran completely wild on him that day, and Chris Spielman made a bunch of tackles 7 yards down the field. Like, well, I mean, that's good, but it's also not that good in some ways. I think we have fallen prey, I think maybe to a little bit to recency bias here. Just the greatest passing performance in Ohio State history. Come on, you know what it is.
Tate Martell.
We both watched it. Tate Martell, 2018, Rutgers, 10 for 10. You cannot beat perfection. Boom.
Yeah, I stand corrected. And now we knew, while we're talking about Tate Martell, let's just go ahead and finish the show, the last 20 or 30 minutes talking about Tate Martell and his greatness. That way, we also have a title, and YouTube will like us.
Instead of that, why don't we talk? We can make a nice smooth transition to defense. And one of Tate Martell's former high school teammates, Haskell Garrett, he had a pretty darn good game. I mean, that might be. I mean, if we're talking about greatest performances, the Ohio State defensive line and their performance, and maybe even if you want to include the linebackers and just go the front seven, I don't know if that's the single greatest defensive front seven performance I've ever seen in my life, but I think it's at least something you could have a conversation about, because it wasn't just, this wasn't like Chase Young last year where, he had the 4-sack game against Wisconsin in the regular season. It's like, that was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. It wasn't just like one guy going off. It was the entire defensive line just completely annihilating Clemson for 60 minutes. And hey, there's Tommy Togiai coming right up the middle and swallowing Travis Etienne whole. Hey, there's Tommy Togiai swallowing Trevor Lawrence whole. Hey, there's Haskell Garrett. Hey, there's Tariq Smith. Hey, there's Jonathan Cooper. And, even, I don't know if Javonte Jean-Baptiste got on the stat sheet with a sack, but he was right in Lawrence's face a bunch of times. Like, you going back and rewatch it, and it's just like, oh, everyone had a good game. And Monday they released the list of champions, and it's like, 12 guys on offense and 12 guys on defense graded out on champions. So if you have every starter plus another guy on both sides of the ball grading out as champions, that's generally a decent sign you had a pretty good game. And I think I don't want to get too hot of a take here, but I think they did. I think they had a pretty good game.
Yeah, the defensive players of the game were the starting defensive line: Haskell Garrett, Tommy Togiai, Tariq Smith, and Jonathan Cooper, and for very good reason. But the only regular on defense who didn't grade out a champion would be Baron Browning. Even Lathan Ransom got in there grading it as a champion, so that was good to see. But yeah, if that defensive line can do the same thing against Alabama and Najee Harris, that would go a long way towards winning that game. The linebackers in that game also graded out a champion, like I said, except for Baron Browning. An impressive performance, and they'll need to continue doing that. We talked to Tuff Borland today. didn't really have much to say, as Tough is wont to do. Not that, I mean, he gives good answers when he's given good questions, and so blame some of that on the questioners, but he's also not also looking to give up any like hints or details about what Ohio State is going to do. Just said about Alabama, what stands out about them: unbelievable team, unbelievable players, talent all over the place, big physical offensive line. We're going to have to find another level for sure. I wonder if there is another level though, Tom. I think we saw this was Ohio State's best game against Clemson. Now they're going to have to play better than that, or will that best game that they just played be good enough?
I think there's a chance that if they play the way they did on Saturday, that's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not, they could play that well and not get nearly the results they got against Clemson, because I do think Alabama is clearly a level above Clemson. I mean, that Clemson defense turned out to be not particularly good. The Clemson offensive line turned out to be pretty darn bad. And, I mean, the Clemson receivers were okay, but they just, it was not like, that was like Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne in the passing game a little bit. And then, and then your voice sort of trails off like, there was not as much there as I think people were expecting. And the defense was not, there were vulnerabilities on that defense. And, again, they didn't have Nolan Turner in the first half. They didn't have James Skalski in the second half. So you never actually saw the full starting defense. But what you did see, and the way they kind of played games with Brent Venables a little bit with the sugar huddles and all of that stuff, they did not make Clemson look like a team that belonged in the top 4 conversation. Now, you can play that well against Alabama, and you're not winning by 3 touchdowns. If they play like that against Alabama, they very well might win. They very well might win by a touchdown or 10 points or something like that. That's a possibility. But that Alabama is not going to play as poorly and have as many issues as Clemson, because Alabama's personnel is just flatly better. Alabama's offensive line is better. Alabama's defensive line is better. And, there are vulnerabilities on Alabama's team. They are not perfect. They have some significant issues on defense. Their starting center's out now with an injury. So, how much will that impact the run game? How much will that impact, setting protections and that kind of stuff? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. This is not an invincible Alabama team. This is not the best team in the history of college football, but they're good and they're better than Clemson. So if Ohio State can beat them, I mean, if they play the way they did against Clemson, I think there's a pretty good chance they beat Alabama, but they're not beating them by 3-4 touchdowns.
Talking to Trey Sermon, he was asked, the first 2 questions were about his smirk that was caught by ESPN after he saw the replay of his 91-yard catch and run touchdown. And, he said, I didn't know for sure I was down, but then after he saw the replay, he kind of knew. He saw his elbow and saw his knee. And then he saw the camera and gave the smirk that will now live on as a meme as long as social media exists, which is great. And he did say it was funny. And I think it's funny because Ohio State won. Say they had lost by 6, and maybe it's not so funny. Like that would have been the one touchdown they needed to win the game. It wouldn't have been nearly as funny. I liked when he was asked what changed for him this year, because Brian Day in the past few weeks has been saying like flat out, we didn't know what we had in him. We weren't sure kind of what was going on because he wasn't. They were hoping he was going to be better than he was. Basically, he wasn't producing like they thought he would. And so when asked what changed for him this year, he said, I just wanted to contribute more. And he wasn't playing his best, so he started practicing a lot harder than he was, doing whatever he could to help himself improve. And then it's amazing once you start practicing harder and doing extra things and doing the little things, it starts to show itself in practice, and your coaches start to rely on you more. Because early on in the season, this was a guy who really couldn't push anybody, couldn't break a tackle, couldn't get an extra yard, would get tripped up over just a one hand randomly reaching out. And now you could have 2 guys trying to tackle him, and he's still somehow going to squeeze out of that and get 3 or 4 yards and then maybe break another tackle. And it's been a really bizarre, or I don't know if bizarre is the right word, just dramatic change from what he was to what he is. And Ryan Day said it could be a number of things. Getting used to this offense, which is different than Oklahoma's. getting used to dealing with sharing carries with Master Teague, although he shared carries his entire career at Oklahoma. But now, clearly he's at his best now. He's comfortable. And I think his days of sharing carries with the Buckeyes is over.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he was shared carriages at Oklahoma, he didn't look like this at Oklahoma. If he looked like this at Oklahoma, Oklahoma would not have been like, yeah, it's fine. You can go to Ohio State. Sure, no problem at all. If Oklahoma knew what they had, I don't think they would have let him go quite so easily. So, but he has been, I mean, he has been a revelation for this team. Like, he is exactly what they needed. And, that part of Justin Fields' incredible performance was the fact that they had that run game they could lean on as well.
We also talked with Nick Saban. I wanted to ask him about Justin Fields and the what goes through a coach's mind, a defensive coach's mind, when the opposing quarterback is a tough guy, and how do you address that with your team? What goes through your own mind? Of course, I did not get called on, John, and so many other people did, and I just getting tired of it, Tom. I'm just gonna start. And the thing is, with these new Zooms that we're doing, you can't just cut in. They actually have to call on you for you to be able to talk. And so I am powerless, and I just sit here and I fume, and then I see everybody else getting to ask their questions, and I don't know if people don't like me because of my association with you.
I don't know what else it could be. Yeah, should you just force your way in? Just don't take no for an answer. Just excuse me, sir. Excuse me. I don't know.
Just keep raising my hand.
Suggestion. Put someone else's name in there. There you go.
Dennis Dodd 2. Dennis Dodd Jr.
You're gonna have to fumble with the buttons a little bit to make that one make that one pay off. But yeah, I think you might. Now. Will your question be of an appropriate intellectual level to pull that off? Because I think obviously if you ask something really insightful, the game may be up.
Who is this really? So yeah, we talked to Nick Saban. Basically, he thinks Ohio State is pretty good. You're not going to get a lot out of him. You're not going to get a lot out of anybody today. Although I could have made a bigger deal out of what Patrick Surtain said when he described Ohio State's receivers as very finesse type of receivers. And I put that on Twitter, and I'm sure other people did as well. But then he was also complimentary of them, saying they have speed and they run great routes and it's going to be a challenge. But had I just left it with Surtain says Ohio State has finesse receivers and just left it at that, then that would have created many more clicks and retweets and likes, instead of saying that and then also adding that they're explosive and they're good. But you could make some bulletin board material out of that if you wanted. If I'm sure Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams, these guys think they're tough, and to have the opposing corner say they're finesse, that's something you can use.
Well, that's one of those things that there's certain terms that you can say them, and it's sort of innocuous the way you say it, but it's like I think last week someone called Justin Fields, talked about Justin Fields, and in the middle of a quote full of other stuff, they called him a game manager. And a game manager is that's like what you say about the Craig Krenzel type quarterbacks and not the Justin Fields type quarterbacks. So yeah, I saw that one and it was like, that's a little bit like Sean Wade last week, comparing Michael Penix and Trevor Lawrence. And it was like, he didn't mean it to be insulting, but if you wanted to sort of squint and turn it into a story, you could. Now, last week, there was plenty of salt flying around in both directions that, made it so you didn't need to manufacture any kind of a story. But this week, if we'll see how the press conferences on Wednesday are. We'll see if we'll see if there's anything else. But man, that was 2 hours of listening to people no, you're so pretty. No, you're so pretty. No, you're so pretty. Okay, all right, girls, you're both pretty. How about one of you guys talks about how you want to beat the other one? Can we do that? Can we have that conversation? No.
No, and I think basically what he's saying is they're smooth, and that would have been the better choice of words, because if if you do want to say finesse, I mean, that's another word for soft.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so that is, I mean, and not just soft, very soft, like very finesse. That could be taking, I don't know if you don't want to take that in a good way, there's no reason to take that in a good way. And you can use that to motivate yourself to get up to play one of the best corners in the nation. Now, what I've been told and what we have been saying is that this is not your Alabama defense that you've been accustomed to over the years, especially everywhere. But they did give up big plays. When asked what went wrong defensively against Ole Miss and UF, Florida, Surtain said, we weren't as communicative as we needed to be. We weren't flying around. There were mental errors that can be improved upon. Looking forward to this game. Just have to be focused and prepare the right way. This is another one where as long as Ohio State protects Justin Fields, the ball is going to be flying down the field, and Ohio State is going to make some plays. And I wanted to ask Ryan Day about the Jameson Williams and what he adds when you've got now any level, any side of the field, in the middle or the outside, you've got guys that need to be worried about in terms of the deep pass. And right now, if they're going to throw the ball to Jameson Williams, good luck. I mean, because you've got three guys that have to be defended and respected as if they are number one guys simply because of their talent and their speed and their ability to stretch the field. And I do wonder, like, if there is more attention starting to be paid to Jameson Williams, then maybe Garrett Wilson gets involved more because he's been pretty quiet of late. But I also don't think that's a bad thing because it opens up the other guys and the tight ends now. And Trey Sermon. There was a Trey Sermon where he was wide open on a wheel route. And that, I think it was in the first half, and they went back to it on a third down that didn't get completed. But you got four guys that can be deep threats, and that's not even including the tight ends down the seam. And I think that will pose problems for Alabama, especially once the running game is going.
Yeah, and Alabama's defensive backfield is a little bit like Ohio State's. It's better than Ohio State's, but it's a little bit like Ohio State's, where it's like Pat Surtain is really fantastic. And, not that you're just not going to look his way, but you're not going to make a living throwing to whoever Pat Surtain is covering. And I think they've played him a little bit more in the slot. I've watched just a tiny little bit more of Alabama than I had the last time we talked, but I think I've seen a little bit of him in the slot recently, which, if that's the case, does that mean he's going to be on Garrett Wilson? Will they move Garrett Wilson outside? But if he's on Garrett Wilson, then you're probably not going to make your living throwing to Garrett Wilson. So you're going to have to hit some of those other guys. You're going to have to take advantage of Jeremy Ruckert. You have to take advantage of Chris Olave. Maybe it's Jameson Williams. Maybe it's Luke Farrell. But Trey Sermon out of the backfield, though. I mean, Trey Sermon out of the backfield, he is the kind of guy. This is not a vintage Alabama linebacker core. Like, they're fine, but they're not fantastic. Ohio State probably has the better linebackers in this game. And I think that might not even be a controversial statement. Like, yeah. Ohio State's linebackers are really good, and Alabama's linebackers are like, they're good. They're fine. For most teams, it's like, wow, the linebackers are the best players on the team. For Alabama, like, this is a down year, I think, for Alabama linebackers. So you have an opportunity to, find Trey Sermon, find Jeremy Ruckert lined up against one of those guys, and maybe take advantage of it.
Yeah, I would agree. Tom, anything else that stuck out to you from the session today? There wasn't, like I said, it was three guys on each team, 15 minutes for each. Not a great deal of, certainly not much smacking, no insults, nothing, Dabo, why did you vote Ohio State number 11, anything like that. It was just, it was the first session, just some feeling out. It's kind of like the first quarter in a football game, except for the football game we just watched. This is more of like a 0-0 after one type of media affair. But anything else that you think we should touch on?
I mean, you mentioned Dabo voting Ohio State 11th. Nick Saban didn't have Ohio State in his top four. Nick Saban had Ohio State 5th. And I saw there was some Alabama writer somewhere that was kind of rolling his eyes at the fact that that was a kind of a conversation point at one point. And it's like, well, he has Ohio State behind Notre Dame and Texas A&M, two teams that they were up by like 4 touchdowns on at one point. So clearly he thinks they're not as good as those two teams. So you can talk all the nice, fluffy, happy words you want to this week, but there's a reason they make those coaches polls ballot public. And okay, this is not a mystery that his name is going to be on this. So yeah, that was, and again, you can get into the motivations there, but that, I think that's an interesting storyline this week.
And Day said, yeah, it's just somebody's opinion and it won't matter once the game gets played, just as he did about Dabo having the Buckeyes 11th. That opinion didn't matter, except saw the reaction from the players afterwards on social media and all of that stuff. And, they said they had heard it, but of course, it won't matter during the game, but it did matter before and it did matter after. And I assume the same would be the case for Nick Saban as well.
Yeah. And, again, like this is, you're trying not to walk the line of manufacturing a story, but I don't think that's manufacturing a story. It's not, again, like this is not the thing that is, yeah. Yeah. This is not the thing that's going to decide the game, but we do have 6 days of coverage between now and then. And, you can only write so many, no, you're the prettiest pony. No, you're the prettiest pony. You can only write that story so many times in the next 6 days. So if Nick Saban wants to vote Ohio State 5th, like, no, that's, and not just vote them 5th, but vote them 5th over behind 2 teams. And, they obviously had not beaten Notre Dame at that point, but to put Ohio State behind a Texas A&M team that they obliterated and a Notre Dame team that I have a feeling by the time he had cast this ballot, he knew that, he probably knew they were going to play Notre Dame, and he probably knew what was going to happen because I knew it was going to happen. I'm assuming Nick Saban is at least as smart a football mind as I am. So I'm going to say that he probably knew that if they were going to play Ohio State, they would have to do it. They would be doing it after having beaten Notre Dame. So yeah, that's a little bit interesting. This is not nearly as spicy as Dabo voting them 11th, but it's a little interesting.
It's not nothing. Mm-hmm. And really that's what we deliver here. Not nothing.
So. I did like Nick Saban having Cincinnati 6th on his ballot. That was good. Ahead of Florida. So
that's an Appalachian boy for you.
There you go. Yeah, I did appreciate that. So his ballot was not entirely incorrect, but
no, I would agree. I think that will do it then, Tom. If you're good with that.
I am good with that because we have a bunch more podcasts to do this week. So we can
pace ourselves.
We can, yeah, exactly. We don't need to go 2 hours on the first day. We'll have plenty more later this week. I just also finished recording a morning scoop with Ross Fulton for Tuesday morning, looking back at the Ohio State offense and why they were so successful doing the things that they were doing. And it was not just, hey, Clemson's defense turned out to be pretty bad. There was actually some really interesting schematic stuff. And I was very excited. I rewatched the first half of the game last night and noticed something. I'm going to ask Ross about this. And then it was in his column. I was like, oh, good. I'm getting smarter. This is good. I need to keep talking to Ross. I'm noticing things now. This is fantastic.
Good for you, Tom. I'm happy for you.
It's weird that I've been hanging out with you for so many years and nothing, just absolute flat line. And then one fall with Ross. And I'm like, hey,
I know.
They called them wide receivers because they're out wide. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. I am like, I am your slingshot. I'm holding you back. I'm pulling you down. And then eventually I just let you go. And then boom, off you shoot. And there's Ross up there to catch you and make you smart. So you are welcome.
You have been holding me back. Agreed.
Thank you. So that will do it. Thank you all for joining us today. Reminder, if you're not yet a member of BuckeyeScoop.com, now is a fantastic time to join. There's been even more information coming of late and more information to come on what's going to be on behind the scenes at the WAC. It's going to be a busy week. Ohio State is preparing for a national title. I'm not sure if you're aware, but expect more information on the preparations, the game planning, the amount of work that goes into something like preparing to play Alabama is significant. So there's already information on that on the Ask the Insiders board. If you are a member, you already know that. If you're not, become a member, try it for a month, see if you like it, and just you'll understand what I'm talking about once you're there. So thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you guys later.